The screen door closes with a small, familiar click, and for a moment the sound seems to hang in the warm evening air before disappearing into the house. Outside, the last light of the day rests along the rooftops and catches on the windshields of the cars parked along the street. A lawnmower has gone silent somewhere nearby. There are birds in the trees, a dog barking once in the distance, and the faint sound of tires moving along the road beyond the neighborhood. Inside, the house feels several degrees cooler than the evening outside. A curtain near the front window shifts with the breeze, brushing softly against the sill. Somewhere farther back, a radio is playing quietly enough that the words are difficult to make out. You can hear the music more clearly than the announcer, a thin stream of sound moving through the rooms. It is the kind of evening that does not seem to require anything from you. No appointment is waiting. No message is arriving. Nothing is asking to be answered immediately. The day is simply coming to an end. The house stands on an ordinary American street in 1957, and from the outside there is very little about it that would seem remarkable. It is a modest family home, perhaps one of thousands built in neighborhoods like this one after the war, with a small front lawn, a concrete path, a driveway, and a porch where the evening air can be felt before entering. The paint is clean, but not new. There are flower beds along one side of the walkway, and the grass has been cut recently enough that the scent still lingers when the breeze passes over it. A mailbox waits near the curb. A newspaper has been folded beneath one arm and carried through the front door. In the driveway, the family car is beginning to cool after the journey home, its engine ticking softly beneath the hood as the metal gives up the heat it gathered during the afternoon. The front door opens and the house changes. It is a small change, almost impossible to notice unless you are listening for it. Shoes touch the floor. A handbag is placed on a nearby surface. A jacket is hung on a hook. Someone calls from the kitchen that dinner will not be long. The ordinary sounds of arrival begin to replace the sounds of the street. The father has come home from work, and with him comes the smell of warm pavement and automobile upholstery, the faint trace of the outside world still clinging to his clothes. He pauses for a moment in the hallway, as people often do when they have just walked through a door, allowing the house to receive them again. The younger child is already somewhere nearby, moving quickly from one room to another, while the older child sits at the kitchen table with a school book open beneath one hand. The pages have been turned several times, although not every line has been read. The kitchen is the busiest room in the house. It has been warming throughout the afternoon, and now the smell of dinner has settled into the walls. A pot sits on the stove. There are vegetables waiting on a cutting board, a loaf of bread wrapped nearby, and a glass jar or two standing on the counter. The refrigerator hums steadily in the corner, an almost constant sound that belongs so completely to the house that nobody notices it anymore. When its door opens, a small rectangle of colder air escapes into the kitchen. Inside are leftovers, milk, butter, perhaps a bowl covered with wax paper, and the ingredients that will become tomorrow's meals. The refrigerator is not simply an appliance sitting against the wall. For an American family in the 1950s, it is part of the rhythm of domestic life, quietly changing what can be bought, stored, prepared, and saved. There is no need to explain this while standing in the kitchen. Someone simply opens the door, reaches inside, and closes it again. On the table lies a handwritten grocery list. The writing is slightly slanted, with several items crossed out and another added in the margin. It is a small thing, easily overlooked, but much of family life is made from things like this: a list, a receipt, a school permission slip, a newspaper folded beside a plate. The great events of history rarely survive in such ordinary objects, yet these are the objects that surrounded people most of the time. A family does not spend an evening thinking about the year 1957. They think about whether there is enough bread for breakfast, whether the homework has been finished, whether the rain will arrive before the laundry is brought inside, and whether there is enough gas in the car to get through the week. Beyond the kitchen, the radio continues playing. It may be sitting on a shelf in the living room, its wooden cabinet catching the last of the daylight. Radio is already an old companion by this time, no longer the strange new wonder it had been for earlier generations. It has become something more intimate. It fills empty spaces. It accompanies cooking and ironing, conversation and paperwork. Someone may turn the volume down when speaking and raise it again when the room grows quiet. The music becomes part of the evening without becoming the focus of it. That is one of the peculiar comforts of a radio. It can be present without demanding that everyone stop what they are doing. Outside, another car passes. Its headlights briefly sweep across the front curtains before moving on. The child at the kitchen table looks toward the window, then back at the book. A telephone hangs on the wall nearby, its coiled cord resting beneath it. It is not glowing. There is no little light waiting to announce anything. If it rings, someone will hear it. Until then, it remains simply another object in the house, as ordinary as the clock above the doorway or the dish towel hanging from its hook. The absence of constant notification changes the shape of an evening in ways that are difficult to notice until you imagine the difference. There are still interruptions, of course. Friends can call, relatives can call, someone can stop by unexpectedly. But between those moments, there is a great deal of uninterrupted time. The clock moves toward dinner. Its ticking is faint, almost hidden beneath the sounds of the kitchen, but once the radio becomes quieter, it can be heard. The hands move across a simple face while the room gradually darkens. The mother reaches toward the window and draws the curtain partway. Outside, the sky has turned from pale blue to a deeper shade, and the houses across the street are beginning to show small rectangles of yellow light. One porch light comes on. Then another. A neighbor stands for a moment beside a parked car, speaking with someone before heading inside. Children who had been playing outdoors begin disappearing through front doors. The neighborhood is not suddenly silent. It is simply changing its voice. For the family inside, the transition is almost unconscious. The day has been divided into its usual pieces, and now the evening has arrived. The workday is over. School is over. The errands have been done. There is nowhere else anyone needs to be for a little while. The father removes his watch and sets it down. The younger child asks a question that has very little to do with anything happening in the kitchen. The older child closes the school book and leaves a pencil lying across the page, promising to return to it later. The radio plays on. There is something especially comforting about this moment, because nothing important seems to be happening. No one is waiting for an extraordinary event. The family is simply gathering inside the same few rooms. And yet, if you stay here long enough, the details begin to reveal a world that has almost disappeared. The evening meal is being prepared without the speed and convenience that would later become ordinary. Food is being handled heated, stored, and served through routines that have been practiced so many times they require little thought. The kitchen is arranged around the habits of the people who live here. The refrigerator, stove, cabinets, sink, table, and telephone each have their place, and each has acquired a kind of quiet familiarity. The father walks toward the living room and picks up the newspaper. It has already been read once, but there are still a few stories he has not finished. He folds it open and sits beneath a lamp whose shade casts a warm pool of light over the chair. The newspaper rustles as he turns a page. For a moment that sound becomes the clearest sound in the room. Paper against paper. A page folded along an old crease. Then the radio fills the space again. The television is there too. It has not yet become the glowing center of the room that it will soon become in so many American homes, but it is already changing the evening. The set sits in its wooden cabinet, waiting to be turned on. The screen is dark. Its presence is enough to suggest that after dinner, the family may gather around it. There may be a program everyone wants to see. There may be a favorite show, a news broadcast, or something the children have been talking about at school. But for now, the television remains off, and the room belongs to the softer sounds of conversation and radio music. From the kitchen comes the sound of water running. A plate touches another plate. A spoon rests against the edge of a bowl. The refrigerator starts its familiar cycle again, briefly becoming louder before settling back into its steady hum. The house is beginning to collect its evening sounds, and perhaps that is what makes an ordinary evening from 1957 feel so distant and so strangely close at the same time. The objects have changed. The technology has changed. The cars outside have long since vanished from the roads, yet the basic rhythm is recognizable. Someone is hungry. Someone is tired. Someone has homework. Someone is deciding what to make for tomorrow. Someone is reading the news. Someone is listening to music. The day has been long, and dinner is almost ready. The front windows have now turned dark enough to reflect the room itself. The outside world is becoming a mirror, while inside the lamps are taking over from the sun. A little later, the curtains will be drawn completely. The television will glow. Plates will be carried to the table. Voices will overlap for a while and then gradually soften as the evening moves onward. For now, though, the family is still coming home. The screen door has already closed. The street is settling into night. And inside this ordinary house, on an ordinary evening in the summer of 1957, dinner is almost ready. The kitchen has become warmer now, not only from the stove but from the steady movement of people through the room. The last of the daylight has disappeared from the windows, leaving the curtains softly illuminated by the yellow light above the sink. The room seems smaller after dark, as if the walls have drawn slightly closer around the family. A dish is placed on the counter. A cabinet door opens and closes. The refrigerator hums in the corner, and somewhere beneath the sink a pipe gives a quiet knock as water moves through it. These sounds are so familiar that nobody pays attention to them. They are simply the sounds the house makes when it is being lived in. The kitchen itself tells a great deal about the family without saying anything at all. There is a place for everything, although not everything is always in its place. A wooden spoon rests beside the stove. A cloth hangs from a small hook. There may be a recipe written on a card, softened at the corners from years of handling, tucked inside a drawer with measuring spoons and other things that are used often enough to never need to be searched for. A loaf of bread waits beneath a clean towel. A jar of sugar sits near the coffee. The cabinets hold cans and boxes bought from the neighborhood grocery store, and the shelves are arranged according to habits that have slowly developed rather than any particular system. The refrigerator door opens again. For a moment, the kitchen is filled with a soft rush of cool air. A hand reaches toward a glass bottle, then pauses. The milk is there, cold and ready for the table. There may also be butter, eggs, cheese, leftover meat, a bowl covered with a plate, and perhaps something sweet saved for later. The door closes with a gentle seal, and the refrigerator returns to its steady work. It is easy, from the distance of the present, to think of an appliance like this simply as part of a kitchen. In 1957, however, the refrigerator represented something much larger than cold storage. By this time, electric refrigeration had become a familiar part of American household life, and families were learning to organize their food around it. Things could be purchased in greater quantities and kept for later. Leftovers could wait until tomorrow. Ice no longer needed to arrive as a block that slowly disappeared. The refrigerator quietly changed the pace of domestic life without asking anyone to notice. Nobody in this kitchen is thinking about that change tonight. The refrigerator is simply where the milk is. And that is how most technological changes become part of history. They stop feeling like inventions and begin feeling like furniture. The stove is doing much of the work now. Its burners glow beneath pots and pans, and the air above them carries the smell of the meal through the house. Cooking is still a process with many small physical steps. Ingredients are opened, measured, chopped, stirred, heated, and tasted. There is no need to rush. The evening has been arranged around dinner, and dinner will arrive when it is ready. A drawer opens. Inside are knives, forks, spoons, and perhaps a few utensils that have been there for years. The drawer closes again. Plates are stacked. Glasses are brought out. The table is cleared of the school book and the newspaper, making room for the things that will soon be needed. The younger child is asked to carry something carefully and is given a task small enough to accomplish without help. A napkin is placed beside a plate. Another follows. There is a rhythm to household work that can be easy to overlook because it rarely announces itself. Someone notices that the table needs to be cleared. Someone notices that the bread should be brought out. Someone remembers that there is not enough coffee for tomorrow morning and adds it to the grocery list. These tiny decisions keep the house moving forward. The mother pauses beside the counter and looks toward the clock. Dinner is close. The clock has been ticking throughout the evening, but now its presence feels more noticeable. The hands are moving toward the hour when the family usually eats. The kitchen light reflects faintly from the glass over the clock face. Outside, the street has become darker. A porch light across the way is still shining. The radio is still playing from the next room, but the volume has been lowered. Conversation has taken its place as the main sound. Someone mentions the weather. Someone else asks whether the rain is supposed to arrive tomorrow. A school assignment is discussed. The younger child is more interested in what might be waiting for dessert. It is an ordinary conversation, and that is precisely why it matters. Family life is built from thousands of conversations that nobody writes down. There are no transcripts of most dinners. No historian records exactly what was said when a father came home from work on a summer evening in 1957, or what a child complained about while waiting for food, or which story made everyone laugh for a moment. These moments disappear almost completely, yet they were the substance of everyday life. The kitchen preserves some of them in its objects. A recipe card might carry the handwriting of someone who is no longer alive. A mixing bowl might have been used so many times that its surface has become dull. A wooden cabinet handle might be slightly worn where hands have reached for it hundreds of times. Even the refrigerator door may carry small marks from years of opening and closing. None of these things are valuable in the usual sense. They are valuable because they were touched. The house is full of evidence that someone has been here before. Near the sink, water runs over a plate. The porcelain becomes slippery beneath the hand, and the sound of the faucet fills the room. A dish is rinsed and placed beside another. The water stops. For a moment, there is only the ticking clock and the faint radio beyond the doorway. Then the faucet runs again. The kitchen has its own soundtrack. There is the scrape of a chair across the floor, the click of a cabinet latch, the soft clink of silverware, the refrigerator compressor, the occasional hiss of the stove, the paper sound of a grocery list being folded, the distant voice of the radio. And beneath all of it, the almost imperceptible sound of the house itself settling into the evening. The 1950s kitchen was also becoming a place where new conveniences were appearing beside older habits. Electric mixers, automatic toasters, coffee makers, washing machines, and other household appliances were becoming increasingly common, although not every family owned every new device. And the experience of household technology varied greatly by income, location, and circumstance. Advertisements often presented the modern kitchen as a place where machines could make domestic work easier and more efficient. But in an ordinary home, technology did not erase work. It simply changed some of the ways that work was done. The family still had to shop. Food still had to be prepared. Dishes still had to be washed. The floor still had to be swept. Laundry still had to be folded. A machine could help with part of a task, but the rhythm of the household remained human. The pantry door opens. Inside are cans arranged in rows, perhaps tomatoes, soup, vegetables, fruit, and other staples. There are boxes of cereal and other packaged foods that have become increasingly familiar in American homes. The labels are colorful, designed to catch the eye even in a small grocery store. Some products promise convenience. Others promise health, energy, or modern living. The family does not stop to admire them. They are simply dinner. One can is opened. The lid makes a small metallic sound as it is lifted away. The younger child watches for a moment, then loses interest and wanders toward the living room. The kitchen continues. There is something almost meditative about watching food being prepared when there is nowhere else to be. The movements repeat themselves. Stirring, cutting, pouring, lifting, setting down. The same hands perform the same motions that they have performed many evenings before, and perhaps tomorrow they will do them again. The family refrigerator may seem ordinary now, but there was a time when keeping food cold inside an electric box was a sign of modernity. The transformation had happened gradually. Homes became more connected to electrical systems. Appliances became more widely available. Manufacturers competed to make domestic life easier. By 1957, the modern kitchen was no longer a vision of the future for many American families. It was becoming part of everyday life. Yet the future was still arriving unevenly. Some families lived in large suburban houses filled with the newest appliances. Others lived in older homes with fewer conveniences. Rural households could experience technology differently from urban ones. Income mattered, geography mattered, access to electricity mattered. The picture of a single universal 1950s American home has always been too simple. This house is only one house. Its routines belong to one family. Its kitchen is not meant to represent everyone, but it offers a doorway. Through this one kitchen, you can begin to feel how millions of ordinary evenings were organized around similar needs: food, work, school, conversation, cleaning, rest, and the quiet desire to make tomorrow manageable. A drawer opens again. A small metal ice tray is lifted from the freezer compartment. The cubes have formed into their familiar shapes, cold and hard beneath the hand. Before automatic ice makers became common in later decades, making ice was a small household task. Water went into the tray went into the freezer. Later, the cubes had to be released. Tonight, the tray is turned slightly. The ice breaks free with a series of small cracks. It is a tiny sound, but one that belongs to another kind of evening. The cubes fall into a glass. Someone adds water. The sound is bright and clear. For a second, everything else seems to disappear behind it. Then the glass is carried toward the dining table. Dinner is ready. The kitchen pauses, not completely. The refrigerator continues humming. A pot remains warm on the stove. Water rests in the sink. The radio is still playing softly. But the active work of preparation is coming to an end, and the room begins to change from workplace into gathering place. The family starts moving toward the table. The father folds the newspaper and leaves it on the chair. The older child closes the school book completely. The younger one arrives first and takes a seat. Someone pulls out another chair. The table is no longer a surface covered with the leftovers of the afternoon. It has become the center of the evening, and for a while, this is where everyone will be. The kitchen light shines above them. The food is carried in. The plates are ready. The house has finished preparing for dinner. Now the family can simply sit down and eat. The first chair scrapes gently against the floor as everyone settles around the table. For a few moments there is very little conversation. Plates are being passed from one person to another. A serving spoon rests against the edge of a dish, and someone reaches across the table for the bread. The kitchen light falls evenly over everything, catching the rim of a drinking glass and the smooth surface of a plate. Outside the windows, the neighborhood has almost disappeared into darkness. The family can still hear an occasional car moving along the street, but from inside the house the sound seems distant, softened by walls and curtains. Dinner begins without ceremony. There is no need for anyone to announce it. The food is simply there, and everyone begins eating. The father sits in his usual place. His workday has left a little tiredness in his face, but now that he is home, his shoulders have relaxed. The mother reaches for something near the center of the table. The older child talks about school, perhaps only because someone asked. The younger child is more interested in finishing one thing quickly so that another can begin. A question is asked. An answer comes. Someone laughs quietly. The conversation moves naturally from one subject to another. School, work, the weather. A neighbor. Something that happened earlier in the day. The price of something at the grocery store. A program that will be on television later. None of these subjects would appear important enough to preserve in a history book, but together they make up the evening. This is what an ordinary family sounds like when nobody is performing for anyone else. The father unfolds the newspaper again for a moment, holding it beside his plate. He has already read some of the day's stories, but there is still something he wants to finish. The paper rustles in his hands. Across the table, the younger child watches the pages move and asks what something means. The newspaper is lowered. An explanation is offered. It may be simple. It may be slightly longer than necessary. Then the newspaper rises again. The news of the outside world has entered the kitchen. In 1957, newspapers remain one of the principal ways many families encounter the larger world. Radio carries news through the day, and television is increasingly becoming part of that landscape, but a newspaper offers something different. It can be held, folded, set aside. Read again. A headline can remain on the table while dinner continues around it. The paper might contain international events, political developments, local stories, advertisements, sports results, weather forecasts, and the small notices of everyday life. The family may discuss some of it. Most of it will simply remain on the page. That is another difference in the rhythm of the evening. Information does not constantly arrive from somewhere. It is encountered in pieces. A newspaper waits until someone opens it. A radio program begins and ends. A television show occupies a particular hour. The day has edges. For the moment, though, dinner is more interesting than the news. A glass is lifted. Someone asks for more water. The serving dish moves across the table again. The younger child reaches toward something and is reminded to ask first. A chair creaks when someone leans back. The clock continues ticking. There is a comfort in eating food that has been prepared in the same kitchen where the family has spent the afternoon. The smell of cooking has settled into the room, and the warmth from the stove is still present. The table is familiar. The plates may have small patterns around their edges. The glasses may not all match perfectly. One fork may have a slightly different shape from another, because household things are rarely replaced all at once. A home is not a showroom. It is an accumulation of ordinary decisions. Something is purchased. Something is inherited. Something breaks and is repaired. Something is kept because it still works. Over time, the room begins to carry the history of the people who live there. The younger child notices a small mark on the table and traces it with one finger. Perhaps nobody remembers exactly when it appeared. Maybe a toy was dragged across the surface years ago. Maybe something hot was set down without a cloth. It is not important enough to fix. It has simply become part of the table. There are thousands of marks like this in old homes. Tiny reminders of ordinary life. A scratch in a wooden floor. A faded patch of wallpaper. A worn place on the arm of a chair. A door handle polished by years of hands. These things rarely survive in photographs, because people usually photograph rooms when they are clean and prepared, not while they are being lived in. Yet the worn places are often more honest than the perfect ones. The family continues eating. The conversation turns toward tomorrow. There is school in the morning. Work will begin again. The father mentions an errand that needs to be handled. The mother remembers something that should be picked up at the store. The older child has another assignment to finish. The younger one asks whether there will be time to play outside. Tomorrow is already beginning to exist inside tonight. This is one of the quiet structures of family life. Even while people are eating, they are preparing for the next day. Clothes will need to be chosen. Breakfast will need to be considered. Lunches may need to be packed. An alarm clock will eventually be set. The car may need fuel. The school books will need to be found again in the morning. Nothing dramatic, just continuity. The evening holds one day and quietly hands it to the next. A breeze moves against the curtains. The window has been left slightly open, and the air carries the smell of damp pavement. Perhaps rain is coming. The younger child notices first. The sound is faint at the beginning, almost indistinguishable from the leaves moving outside. Then a few drops touch the glass. Tap, a pause. Another tap. Soon the rain becomes steadier. The conversation continues. There is no reason to stop dinner because of it. The rain simply joins the evening. It changes the sound of the house. The street becomes quieter. Tires moving over wet pavement create a soft rushing noise. The occasional car passes more slowly. The roof begins to collect the sound, and the windows become dark mirrors reflecting the kitchen light. Inside, the family remains together. The rain makes the room feel more enclosed, and the kitchen seems warmer by comparison. Someone reaches for the bread again. Someone asks whether the window should be closed. It is. The curtain settles. The rain continues outside. For a moment, the family is surrounded by two different worlds. Inside there is food, conversation, electric light, and familiar objects. Outside there is darkness, wet pavement, trees moving in the wind, and the wider neighborhood disappearing behind rain. This small division between indoors and outdoors has always been one of the pleasures of evening. The house becomes a shelter, not because anything terrible is happening outside, but simply because it is comfortable to be inside when the weather has changed. The father finally sets the newspaper aside. He folds it carefully, creasing it along its existing lines before placing it beside his chair. The paper will probably be read again later. Perhaps tomorrow morning it will be opened at the breakfast table. For now, dinner has his attention. The conversation becomes lighter. A story from work. A joke about something that happened during the day. A question from the older child about something in school. The younger child tells a story that becomes slightly longer with every sentence. Nobody checks a clock for the purpose of seeing what might be happening somewhere else. The clock in the kitchen is enough. This is perhaps one of the strangest things to notice when looking backward from the present. The family has access to news, entertainment, music, and communication, but all of those things have physical locations and natural stopping points. The radio is in another room. The television is in the living room. The telephone is attached to the wall. The newspaper is on the table. The world is available, but it is not carried around in a pocket. The dinner table remains a place where attention can settle. The younger child finishes first. The plate is pushed slightly forward. There is a pause before anyone gets up. Then the chair moves back. The child carries the plate toward the kitchen, perhaps with a reminder to be careful. Dinner is beginning to end. One person remains seated a little longer, finishing the last few bites. Another reaches for a glass. The rain has become steadier now, and the kitchen window is covered with tiny trails of water. The dishes begin to disappear from the table. The transformation is gradual. A plate is carried away, then another. Silverware is gathered. A glass is lifted. The table slowly returns to its earlier shape. Yet the evening is not over. This is only the end of dinner. The living room is waiting. The television is still dark, The radio is still playing, the lamps are already on, and the house seems to know, in its own quiet way, that the most comfortable part of the evening may still be ahead. Before anyone leaves the table completely, the older child remembers the schoolbook left behind earlier. It is still there, slightly pushed to one side, its pencil resting across the open page. The child picks it up and carries it toward the living room, then pauses near the doorway. The rain can be heard more clearly now. The kitchen behind them is beginning to empty. The living room ahead is dimmer, lit mostly by a single lamp. For a moment, the two rooms meet in the doorway. The warm kitchen. The darker living room. The sounds of dishes being washed. The soft murmur of the radio. The rain beyond the glass. The family moves toward the next part of the evening, and behind them, the kitchen begins its quieter work, returning itself to order while the house slowly settles into the night. The living room is darker than the kitchen, and the change is immediate when the family enters. One lamp stands beside the sofa, its shade casting a warm circle of light across the carpet and the nearby chair. The rest of the room is allowed to remain in shadow. Outside, rain continues against the windows, and every so often a passing car sends a brief wash of light across the curtains. The radio has been turned down even further, almost becoming part of the background. The television waits in its wooden cabinet, dark and reflective, its screen showing only a faint image of the room around it. For a few minutes, nobody turns it on. The family settles into the furniture instead. The father returns to his chair with the folded newspaper. The mother sits nearby with something small in her hands, perhaps a piece of sewing or another household task that can be finished while listening. The older child brings the schoolbook along, but leaves it closed. The younger child finds a familiar place on the carpet. There is no rush. The evening has reached that comfortable period when the day's obligations have mostly been completed, but bedtime is still far enough away to feel distant. The television finally comes to life. A hand reaches toward the controls, and the dark screen changes. There is a brief flicker, a soft electronic glow, and then the room acquires another source of light. The television's changing brightness moves across the faces of the family, sometimes making the room seem brighter, sometimes darker, depending on what is happening on the screen. By 1957, television has become an increasingly important part of American home life. The Great Transition has already begun. What once required a trip to the cinema can now happen from a chair in the living room. Families can watch news, comedy, drama, variety programs, sports, and other entertainment without leaving the house. But the experience is still very different from the television that will eventually become familiar decades later. There are fewer channels. Broadcast schedules matter. Programs begin at specific times. If something is missed, there may be no easy way to watch it later. So the evening bends around the schedule. The family watches what is on, and sometimes that is enough. The television cabinet itself is worth noticing. It is furniture as much as machinery, built from wood and designed to belong in the room rather than dominate it like a separate piece of technology. The screen is not enormous. It does not cover an entire wall. The set occupies a particular place, and the family arranges itself around it. The room is still a living room first. The television is simply becoming one of the reasons people gather there. The father adjusts his position in the chair. The younger child sits closer to the floor. The older child opens the schoolbook for a moment, then looks up when something interesting happens on the screen. The mother listens, while continuing with the small task in her hands. Outside, the rain continues. The sound of it is partly hidden by the television, but during quieter moments it becomes noticeable again. Rain against glass, rain against the roof, water moving along the gutters, the occasional tires of a car passing on the wet street. The living room seems sealed away from the weather. There is something reassuring about watching a screen while rain falls outside. The world beyond the windows becomes distant, while the lamp, the furniture, the television, and the familiar voices remain close. The family is not necessarily watching with complete attention. Someone may glance toward the clock. Someone may talk during the program. Someone may get up to bring a drink from the kitchen. Someone may ask what happened in the story after missing a few minutes. Television has not yet become the silent command center of every room. It is still part of a social evening. The father lowers the newspaper to listen. The older child whispers something to the younger one. The younger child laughs. The mother smiles without looking away. For a little while, the entire family is connected by the same small rectangle of light. This is one of the great changes taking place inside American homes during the middle of the 20th century. Entertainment is moving inward. The family no longer has to travel somewhere else to be entertained. The living room itself is becoming a place where national events, performances, advertisements, sports, comedy, and news can enter the home, yet the experience remains intimate. The television is surrounded by the ordinary things of family life. A lamp, a sofa, a side table, a stack of magazines, a pair of slippers, a family photograph, perhaps a small decorative object that has no particular practical purpose, but has been sitting there for years. The room does not look futuristic. It looks lived in. The radio is still nearby, and that is another detail worth lingering over. Television has not simply erased radio, the two exist together. Radio remains useful when nobody wants to watch a screen. It can accompany breakfast, housework, driving, and quiet moments. It can continue playing without requiring anyone to sit down. The television asks for eyes. The radio asks only for ears. Tonight, the television wins. The newspaper rests folded beside the father's chair. Its pages have become slightly damp from the humidity near the window. Tomorrow morning, the paper will return to the breakfast table, where the family will see it again beneath the light of another day. The evening continues. A commercial comes on. The room changes again. Someone talks during it. Someone reaches for a drink. The younger child asks whether the program will come back soon. There is something almost comical about how quickly attention moves in a family room. The screen is important, but not sacred. Conversations continue. People leave and return. A person can be interested in the program and still be thinking about something else. The television does not yet fill every empty second. There are still pauses. And in those pauses, the house can be heard. The clock, the rain, the refrigerator from the kitchen, a floorboard, a distant voice, the soft movement of someone getting comfortable. These sounds remind you that the television is only one part of the environment. The living room itself has a history. The furniture may have been purchased after the family moved into the house, or some pieces may have come from another home. The carpet has absorbed years of footsteps. The curtains have faded slightly where sunlight reached them during the day. The sofa has a place where people naturally sit because the cushion has softened there. A home becomes comfortable, partly through use. Objects lose their newness. Rooms acquire habits. People stop thinking about where things came from and simply remember where they belong. On a nearby table sits a small family photograph. It may show the children when they were younger. Perhaps everyone is standing stiffly, because photographs still require a little preparation. Someone has dressed carefully. Someone is looking slightly away from the camera. The picture is not perfect, but it is kept. There may be other photographs in drawers, albums on shelves, or snapshots tucked into books. These photographs are different from the moving images on television. Television shows people the family does not know. The photograph shows people who belong to the family itself. One is entertainment, the other is memory, and both are gathered into the same room. The older child eventually closes the school book again. There will be time to finish the assignment later. For now, the television has become the center of attention. The program continues. Outside, the rain grows heavier for a few minutes. The window becomes a dark surface crossed by water. A streetlight glows through the wet glass. The neighborhood beyond it is difficult to see. The house feels smaller, warmer, more private. The younger child begins to grow tired. The father notices but says nothing at first. The mother glances toward the clock. The hour is getting later. This is another quiet transformation of the evening. At first, nobody thinks about bedtime. Then, someone checks the clock. Then someone mentions school in the morning. Then the younger child begins moving more slowly. The room has not changed much, but everyone's relationship to it has. The night is becoming visible. The television remains bright. But the family is beginning to look beyond it. A glass is taken to the kitchen. The younger child is reminded to get ready for bed soon. The older child gathers the school book. The father folds the newspaper one last time. The program continues without them. And for a moment, the living room becomes a place of departures. One person leaves, then another. The television keeps playing. The lamp remains on. The rain continues. This is perhaps one of the most revealing things about a family evening. There is no single moment when everyone decides that the night is finished. The household gradually breaks apart into smaller routines. Someone goes upstairs. Someone remains downstairs. Someone washes dishes. Someone reads. Someone watches the last part of a program. The house changes room by room. The living room will eventually become quieter. But before that happens, the older child pauses near the television and looks back toward the window. The rain has softened. Beyond the glass, the streetlights are shining on wet pavement. A parked car reflects the light along its roof. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, and then stops. The television speaks softly behind them. The house is between two worlds again. Inside, there is electric light and the glow of the screen. Outside, there is rain, darkness, and the sleeping neighborhood. The child turns away from the window. The school book is carried upstairs. The father remains in his chair for a little longer. The mother gathers a few things from the side table. The television continues to flicker, and slowly, almost without anyone noticing, the center of the evening begins to move away from the living room. The house is not going to sleep yet, but it is getting there. The front door opens only a little, just enough for someone to step onto the porch and look out at the street. The rain has almost stopped now. Water still shines along the pavement beneath the streetlights, and the air carries that cool, damp smell that comes after a summer shower. From inside the house, the living room remains visible behind the glass, its television still glowing softly in the background. For a moment, the boundary between the house and the neighborhood feels very thin. The street has changed since sunset. Earlier, there were children moving between yards, cars arriving in driveways, people carrying groceries, and voices traveling between porches. Now most of the windows are lit from within, and the sidewalks are nearly empty. A few houses still have people outside. Someone is standing beneath a porch roof, speaking quietly with a neighbor. A dog moves along a fence and stops to sniff the wet grass. Farther down the block, headlights appear briefly, pass through the intersection, and disappear. Nothing important is happening. And yet, there is a whole world here. The neighborhood is one of the places where ordinary American life in the 1950s becomes easiest to imagine. These streets are not simply roads connecting houses. They are shared spaces, places where people see one another, borrow things, exchange news, watch children play, and gradually learn the rhythms of the families living nearby. The homes are close enough that a voice can sometimes travel from one porch to another. A screen door closes somewhere across the street. Another answers a few seconds later. There is a porch swing moving gently in the damp air. Its chains make a faint metallic sound whenever the swing reaches the end of its motion. A porch light attracts a few small insects. Beneath another light, a newspaper has been left folded on a chair, protected from the rain. The neighborhood is beginning to settle. This is the same street the family has seen all day, but darkness makes it feel different. During daylight, small details are obvious: the color of the houses, the condition of the lawns, the children's bicycles, the cars parked along the curb. At night, those details disappear and are replaced by small pools of light. One house glows through its curtains, then another, then another. The street becomes a collection of private evenings. In one house, someone may be washing dishes. In another, a family may still be watching television. Somewhere, a baby may be sleeping. Someone may be reading in bed. Someone may be sitting beside an open window, listening to the rain. The same hour can contain hundreds of different routines. A car passes slowly over the wet road. Its tires make a soft rushing sound. The driver turns into a driveway. The headlights sweep across a lawn, briefly illuminating the trunk of a tree and the lower branches of a hedge. Then the engine is turned off. A door opens. A voice calls goodnight. The car door closes. The neighborhood returns to its quieter rhythm. The family on the porch has already seen versions of this scene many times. Cars arrive. Cars leave. People come home from work. Children return from playing. Neighbors speak through open doors. Someone always seems to know what has happened nearby before the newspaper has printed it. Information travels differently in a neighborhood. A telephone can carry a voice across town, and the local newspaper can tell people what has happened beyond their immediate surroundings. But much of everyday knowledge still moves person to person. A neighbor sees another neighbor in the grocery store. Someone mentions that a family member is visiting. Someone talks about a new car. Someone asks whether the road construction is finally finished. Someone knows which child has started school. Someone has a recipe. Someone has a spare tool. Someone knows a person who can repair something. The network is informal, almost invisible. But it is there. A child rides a bicycle along the sidewalk, tires whispering over damp concrete. The child is probably heading home. The bicycle slows near a driveway, and a voice from a porch calls out a name. The child answers, then keeps going. For many families, evenings in this period still included considerable time spent outdoors, especially in neighborhoods where children could move between yards and streets with fewer of the concerns that would shape later generations. The details varied greatly from place to place, and not every neighborhood was the same. But the simple pattern is familiar, children played, adults talked, and people used the space around their homes as an extension of the house itself. Porches mattered, front steps mattered, driveways mattered. A small patch of lawn could become a playground, a sidewalk could become a place to stop and talk. A fence could be something to climb over, lean against, or simply stand beside while talking with a friend. The boundary between private and public life was often softer than it is today. The front porch was especially important. It was neither completely inside nor completely outside. You could sit there and still feel part of the house. You could watch the street without walking into it. Neighbors could pass by and say hello. The porch allowed people to be visible to one another without requiring a formal invitation. Tonight, however, most porches are empty. The rain has made the air cooler, and the families who were outside earlier have moved indoors. Only a few porch lights remain. The family steps back inside. The screen door closes with the same familiar click from earlier in the evening. The sound is almost unchanged. But now the house feels different. It has been several hours since everyone arrived home. The evening has passed through dinner and television. The children are beginning to disappear upstairs. The world outside has become darker. The front hallway is dim. Yet before the house settles completely, there is still time to notice the objects that connect the family to the neighborhood beyond the walls. Near the door, perhaps there is a small shelf holding keys. The car keys are placed there at the end of the day. A raincoat hangs from a hook. An umbrella leans against the wall. There is a telephone nearby, its receiver resting quietly in its cradle. The telephone is one of the few objects in the home that can suddenly change the entire atmosphere of an evening. When it rings, it demands attention. The bell is physical and unmistakable. Everyone hears it. Someone answers. A voice comes through the receiver. And for a few minutes, the outside world enters the house. But tonight, the telephone remains silent. It is simply waiting. The family has no need to know what everyone else is doing. The neighborhood has become a collection of quiet possibilities. Farther away, a train passes. The sound arrives slowly. First, there is almost nothing, then a faint vibration in the distance, followed by the deeper rhythm of the cars moving along the tracks. It does not last long. The sound rises, passes through the night, and fades. The family may barely notice it. But the house does. Old houses collect sounds. They carry footsteps through hallways. They carry water through pipes. They carry voices from one room into another. They carry the hum of appliances. They carry rain against windows. And sometimes they carry distant sounds from the world beyond the neighborhood. A train, a siren, a truck changing gears, a dog barking, a car door closing. These sounds become part of the memory of a place. The rain has now almost completely stopped. Outside, droplets still fall from the leaves. A streetlight reflects in a shallow puddle. The air smells of wet grass and pavement. The family car sits quietly in the driveway, its windows dark. Earlier, it had carried someone home. Now it will remain there until morning. That car itself says something about the era. The American automobile had become deeply connected to everyday life by the 1950s. Families used cars for work, shopping, school, church, visiting relatives, and weekends away. The expanding suburbs and growing network of roads made the automobile more important to ordinary routines. Yet in the evening, once the car was parked, it became almost invisible. It was simply part of the landscape, a machine that would matter again tomorrow. The same is true of many objects around the house. The car waits. The telephone waits. The newspaper waits. The school books wait. The refrigerator works. The clock continues. Most of life is made from things waiting to be used again. Upstairs, a bedroom light turns on. The younger child has gone to bed. Another light appears a few moments later. The family is gradually moving upward through the house. The world outside is now almost entirely dark. From the front window, only fragments remain visible. A porch light. A tree. The shape of a parked car. A distant window. The wet sidewalk. The neighborhood has become a quiet pattern of small lights. Somewhere, another family is probably finishing dinner. Somewhere, another child is being told to brush their teeth. Somewhere, a father is still reading the newspaper. Somewhere, a mother is turning off the kitchen light. Somewhere, a television is still glowing, and somewhere, someone is standing beside an open window, just as this family did earlier, listening to the night. The thought is comforting because ordinary life is rarely isolated. Every house contains its own version of the evening. The details differ, the routines differ, the people differ. But the larger rhythm is shared. Work ends, families gather, dinner is eaten. Lights come on, the day becomes night, and eventually everyone begins preparing for tomorrow. The front room is now nearly empty. The television can be seen through the doorway. Its light flickers across an unoccupied chair. The father is still downstairs, but the rest of the family has moved toward the bedrooms. The house is beginning to separate into smaller pockets of activity. The kitchen has been cleaned. The living room is quieter. The street outside is almost still. Only the clock seems determined to continue. The world has become smaller. Soon there will be no reason to look outside at all. The curtains will be closed. The lights upstairs will become the brightest things in the house. And the evening will move gently toward the rooms where people sleep.